Hello all, and welcome to April 2023's Windfall Reading Evening. So glad you could be here, and on this, if you're in Eugene, kind of spring day. I mean, it's very Eugene spring. It's kind of dark, but that's all right. April flower showers and all that. So very glad to have you here for a couple of fantastic authors and a lovely hour of readings. Before we begin, my name is Wendy and I work at the library here in Eugene, and I'm glad to help host this. I have a couple of thank yous. First of all, the Lane Literary Guild, with which we could not do this. A fantastic group of people. You'll meet two of the members shortly, Amanda and Diane. They help support authors and writers of all ages and stripes in Eugene, in Lane County, and beyond. So it's nice that the Lane Literary Guild can stretch beyond just Lane County. And they've just been highly influential for many years. And as a Windfall Reading Series has gone on for many years, we're really pleased that they continue to work with us at the library. And they're just a wonderful group of people. So thank you to the Lane Literary Guild. Also, a heartfelt thanks to the Eugene Public Library's two fundraising and supportive groups, the Eugene Public Library Foundation and the Friends of the Eugene Public Library. Both groups, one just recently had a fantastic book sale. Once a year, we have a massive book sale at the Lane Fairgrounds, and that was, as ever, a huge success. Both groups really, they make our collections possible. We wouldn't have a large print collection of any note without them. They make our programs possible. They do so much for the community and for the library, and we are eternally grateful for all of their hard work. So thank you so much to these groups. So tonight's readings, at the end of the readings or throughout, if you have comments, if you have ideas or questions that you'd like the authors to answer, there are a couple different ways that you can get those questions or comments to them. One is right below the screen in YouTube. Sign in and write your questions right there or your comments, and we'll see them at the end and we will read them out loud and discuss them. You're also welcome to email me, so you don't have to necessarily have it in the format that's right on YouTube. You can also have it, let me open that up a bit, right there. So you can email me anytime. It should also be right below this window as well. Send me an email with your questions or your comments. You can use your name, you can use your pet's name, you can use a pseudonym of any kind, literary figure you like, whatever you want, and I will read those at the end as well. So we can have a fantastic discussion at the end of the readings. So feel free to do that. So lots of different ways to get involved. All right, so I would like to also now introduce both Amanda and Diane, who are our hosts from Lane Literary Guild. Hello to you both. Oh, there.
Hello, Wendy, and welcome everyone. Ann Stinson grew up on her family's tree farm in southwestern Washington state on a ridge above the Cowlitz River. When her brother died, she returned to this beautiful place near where I also grew up. As the co-owner of 300 acres of Douglas fir, western red cedar, and ponderosa pine. Her memoir, The Ground at My Feet, a finalist for the Oregon Book Award, portrays a family, a region, and an industry, mapping interactions over centuries between the land and its humans, Cowlitz peoples, homesteaders, and generations of logging families. She writes, "This book is from the trees. It is me making sense of the grounding the land has given me, a call to see the earth and what it gives." Welcome, Anne.
Thank you so much. It's just a pleasure to be here. Like Diane said, this is a small world. We both grew up in the tiny town of Toledo, Washington. But I also want to start by thanking the Eugene Public Library. Libraries are dear to my heart. Toledo did not have a library growing up, and so my mom would take us to Longview Public Library, and she would go play the organ for choir practice at the church, and the three children, my sister Julie and my brother Steve and I, would go to the library and have free reign for an hour and a half, and we'd get our 10 books each, and we would drive home. And I have a memory of driving down I-5, and it was dark, and we begged Mom to stay right in front of the car and behind us so that we could use the headlights of that car to read. But anyway, libraries have always been a place of sustenance and comfort for me. So thank you very much. I'm going to organize today's reading around how this book grew. I didn't know that I was writing a book when I started writing. I went to a art camp with my mom. She's a visual artist. She does ceramics. And there's a group called Creative Arts Community in Portland that has a summer camp every year at Manuka on the Columbia River. And I'm not a visual artist, so I decided to take a writing class. And the teacher for the first 3 years that I was there was Ann Staley, and she's a poet in the Salem area. Probably many of you know her. And some of the things that I wrote in that workshop are in my book. And so I'm going to read one short passage from then. Simple berry buckle, butter, eggs, sugar, lemon, flour, and berries. Picking the berries is the best part. It brings Steve to me. He died with blackberry scratches on his hand. And the vines still grow, trailing blackberries low to the ground. New vines stretch along the edge of a clear cut, now filling with 4-year-old pine, fir, and cedar, along with foxglove, mullein, and daisies. It was Steve's favorite spot and is still full of fruit. Next year, the shade from the growing trees might not let in enough sunlight. My favorite trove this summer is a broken down cedar log, decaying for 50, 60 years, its red flesh webbed with vines, each bearing 5 or 6 berries. A pileated woodpecker drums nearby. A hummingbird whirs in the fireweed. I'm so determined to pick a berry hiding under a salal leaf, I get nettles on my chin. Steve feels near, and I can almost hear him chuckling. An hour of picking and my container is full. I walk back home in my hickory shirt and Carhartts, my arms and legs unpierced by the thorns. The berry juices paint the batter red. The oven that baked Steve's last pie plumps and goldens the cake. Our fractured but mending family digs through the cream to the warm buckle and finds Steve's berries from the young forest. A couple of years later, I took a class with Mark Cunningham in literary arts. Mark is a Portland author. He has a small press in Portland as well called Atelier 26. And the book, or the class that I took with him, was called On Form. And we read a bunch of different books that played with how you can arrange words on the page. And it gave me some ideas of how to play with form myself. And I had one chapter about the Cowlitz peoples in Toledo that I just had all these different stories. I had the story of Tassimeth. She was the daughter of one of the influential Cowlitz tribes in the 1800s, and she married Simon Plamondon, who was one of the first white traders to come up the Cowlitz River. And then I had gone to visit a Cowlitz powwow, and I had interviewed a couple tribal members, and I just had all this information that I didn't quite know how to put together. And that class inspired me to use the Raven story to kind of pull together all these pieces. So I weave the excerpts from the story and then the information from all these different bits about the Cowlitz peoples that I gleaned, and then a narrative of my brother telling the story. Those are the three strands that kind of weave through this chapter. So I'm going to read a little bit from that chapter. The trees and soil that make up our tree farm are in the center of traditional Cowlitz tribal lands. In the 19th century, the Cowlitz understanding of land use did not depend on surveys, deeds, boundary lines, or individual ownership. My query of who owned our land, first answered by a narrow ladder of names found in large ledgers, broadens out into an answer that changes the question, expands to thinking about an entire culture. I want to look, to know more about the community of people who were the first people to hunt deer and elk, gather camas and cedar bark, and drink fresh spring water from the land that now hosts our vegetable garden, empty doghouse, Gemini Grove, and the current clear cut. Many Northwest American tribes, including the Coast Salish, the larger linguistic group to which the Cowlitz belong, have a story about Raven. Steve loved this story, one he first found in Bill Reed and Robert Bringhurst, The Raven Steals the Light, and would tell it at moon rising parties. As with all tales from oral traditions, versions abound and are shaped anew in each telling. Steve stands next to the fire pit at the bluff's edge. The moon is rising in a cloudless sky from behind Mount Rainier. He smiles and begins. At the beginning of time, the earth was covered in darkness, an inky, pitchy darkness. There were no stars and moon to light up the evening sky, and no sun to shine in the day. It was very difficult for anyone to hunt or fish or gather berries for food. There was an old man who lived along the banks of a stream with his daughter. He had boxes within boxes, and the smallest one contained all the light in the world. Every day he opened the boxes and said, "All the light in the world is mine, all mine. If no one can see my daughter, no one can know if she's beautiful, and she will not leave me." One day, mischievous Raven, who had always existed, overheard the old man talking about his boxes. He instantly decided to steal the light, but first had to find a way to get inside the hut. Eugene, my sister-in-law, and I drive to Bear Haven, home of Roy I. Wilson, honorary chief and spiritual leader of the Cowlitz. I've called to make an appointment to see the longhouse and museum he has built about 5 miles west of the Cowlitz River, and the tall, white-haired 90-year-old is waiting for us on his riding lawnmower. Another class I took with literary arts was taught by a woman named Jennifer Denbrough. And the focus of that class, it was called Lyric Essay. And she did a really interesting exercise. She asked people to write the name of the topic that they wanted to write about on the top of a piece of paper. And then we passed it around and everybody wrote a question or a comment about that topic. And I was feeling a little pissy at the moment. I wrote down logging, and it's right in the middle of Portland, and I didn't know what I was going to get. But people had some good questions, and just the exercise itself kind of unleashed an idea about that I wrote an essay that ended up being the first essay in the book, and I'm going to read a little bit from that. My family moved to this land in 1972 when I was 9. We'd lived in Seattle for 2 years prior, and I invited my best friend from those days to the tree farm. We had just logged along the country road that bisects our farm, and I ducked my friend's head down in the car so she wouldn't see the stumps. Where did this instinct come from? How did I know at 9 that city people looking at a cutover only see destruction? Logging is a link in the chain that brings a natural, renewable resource out of the woods and into a public, often urban space. It's almost as if this handoff from rural people who tend and harvest to urban people who purchase and consume is secret and silent. It ought to be a celebration, a merging of peoples, an acknowledgement and appreciation of gifts. Language is part of the problem. We don't have a good name for our land. Non-industrial private forest is too bulky and tells what we aren't more than what we are. Timberland conjures up lumberjacks or shoes worn by hipsters. Tree farm makes people think of Christmas trees. The woods is what Dad says when he's going out to mulch, tube, or thin, but it's not really a name. Forest conjures up park, untouched nature. But when was natural? As I kept writing, I got really curious about what happens to our trees after they become logs and roll out on the log truck. And I first went to visit a mill called Reichert's Mill. It's about a mile from our house, and they process all of our cedar. And it all goes into fence posts, which is a little bit boring, anticlimactic, but there it is. And then I went to Longview, to the port of Longview. About 30% of our wood is exported to Asia. And so Dad and I went to visit and to just see how things work there. And I got the idea that I really wanted to ride on a log ship from Longview to Japan, where I had lived for a couple of years in the 80s and hadn't been back for a long time. And at first, the company that I contacted said, yes, you can ride the log ship, but then they said no. And that was okay. But Dad and I were able to meet with a captain and the crew of a ship that was going to Japan. And I got a bee in my bonnet to give the captain a camera, Instax camera, where he could take instant photographs like Polaroids and put them in a notebook and write notes on them. And as I gave him an example, because I'm a good middle school teacher and know that everybody needs an example to know what to do. So this ship went sailing across the ocean, and Dad and I flew to Japan. And when we met with the captain of the same ship, there he was with the notebook and photographs. So this is an excerpt about that. Captain Alfonso comes to greet us. In his hand is the ship's logbox, and he's done it. I start to hug him, but choose a handshake instead. My notebook, my insentient substitute, has returned. The captain's photos are taped to each page, and his neat penmanship provides more details. Distant experiences are in my hand. I open the ship's log and study the crew's photos from the 20-day voyage. Captain Alfonso is in charge of a crew of 19. All are Filipino, working in 9-month contracts. One of his main jobs, he says, is to make sure the crew's relationships are harmonious. I organize birthday parties and join the crew to sing karaoke with the magic sing machine in the evenings. Captain Alfonso asks, "Your dad is so strong. What is his secret?" "Yoga," I reply, "and he works in the forest." "Does he smoke?" "No, but he drinks, and his mind is clear. He doesn't worry." The captain nods. He tells me his uncle was also a ship captain. Hearing his uncle's stories made him dream of becoming one too. He graduated from the Philippine Maritime Institute in 1978 and has been traveling the oceans since. And then he put some pictures of the log ships down here and some of his notes right down here. He says that the ship holds 6,409,000 board feet of wood. And so I figured out that that's 1,300 log trucks, 200 acres of 40-year-old trees. And I think the numbers stagger. The appetite of the world's population overwhelms. Dad and I talk with the officers as they steer the ship. Computers do most of the work, but the chief officer and the third officer monitor them. After the long voyage, with just each other, the men are happy to answer our questions. Augustus prefers log ships to other cargo ships because they take a long time to load and he can have shore leave. He shows us photos of him at a Trailblazers basketball game last fall. Basketball is big here on the ship. At lunch in the cafeteria, a taped game shows LeBron James still playing for the Cavaliers. At breakfast the next morning, the same game begins again. When I'd almost finished the book, I sent a draft to a good friend of mine from my New York days, and she lives in New Jersey now. And so I went out to visit with her, and I had a section in here about my mom. And at first I had it in an interview style, question, answer. And she said that made it feel really remote, like I didn't actually know my mom. Anyway, I thought, do I know my mom? But I changed it, and I really like the way that it feels now. So I'm going to read just a section about that from that chapter, excuse me. In the months after Steve's death, Mom made a vessel she calls a pieta. The pieta in Mom's case has 2 eyes, but otherwise no human features. No obvious mother and dead body. It's a vessel holding a vessel, a round body with a long, thin arm holding a smaller open cup. A long, slender neck rises above the round body. On a May afternoon, we sit in the carport at the farm, next to the blue door leading to the freezer, the sauna, the canned goods, and the half racks of beer. Blue Moon for Mom and Bridgeport IPA for Dad. One of the first sunny days this year. It is glorious. Dandelions and heather and lilac and tulips are in full force, and rosebuds already signal summer. Mom sits in her customary chair on her blue cushion. It's the chair she sits in to smoke her Marlboro Lights, to follow the Blazers games, play Words with Friends on her iPhone, monitor the progression of the seasons, and watch the birds. Next to her, on a wooden box, sits 2 glass jars. One holds a lighter, a notepad, and a pen for an occasional haiku. Wads of silver paper, a cigarette pack lining, fill the other jar, awaiting an art project. I sit on the concrete, my feet in the gravel. She tisks and says, "A man once told me sitting on the concrete is bad for your parts." I said anyway. Mom tells me the Pieta was inspired by the turtle goddess of Myrtos. The Greek figure with the pitcher in the arm seems to me a parallel to the central concept of a traditional Pieta, the mother holding the dying Jesus. I mean, this figure is cradling a pitcher in her arm. In my thinking, it symbolizes the dead child. Religion, such as Christianity, provides vocabulary and iconography to express things that are difficult to express. As she sees it, the mother and dead son are communicating without words. In the original Greek figure, the water liquid can pass from the mother shape to the child shape, the pitcher. I closed that passageway to mark the ending of the relationship. I now know that the relationship with Steve doesn't end. I could have left the hole open. I didn't realize that until quite a while after I finished the piece. Mom often says that when she works with clay, her mind is free, and working with clay has enhanced her relationship with music. She realized her music had just been note by note. It had no heart. I was just interested in making sure I played the right note with the right rhythm. After clay, a spiritual quality began to infuse my musical performances. One of the last changes that I made to my manuscript involved the poetry. I had about 5 sections of the book that were in poetry form, but I started meeting with a group of poets that I met by a group sponsored by Two Sylvia's Press in Seattle, and they helped me make my poems a lot better and made me realize that some of my poems weren't actually poems. They were just, prose with line breaks. But I left 2 poems in, and looking back, it's interesting to realize that the sections that are still poems are probably the ones that have the most emotion attached to them. One is really a heart, sort of a tragic dynamic between my brother and my dad, and but another one is a really joyful one. And I'm going to end my presentation tonight by reading that one. Across Collins Road, from the driveway in the paper box, is the well-traveled trail to the spring, to the 5-year pine and cedar plantation, to the island of 70-year-old cedar and fir, to the western boundary, to the wetland with ash and camas. Eugene and I are the new owners of this family land, bought in 1971 by my dad, our current senior forester. As raven, eagle, and red-tailed hawk, Steve watches us, Eugene's husband, my brother. This year, we will find 2 treasures on the trail, as if the land wants to welcome its new nurturers. First, an edible-looking leaf, abundant in the Poggy Swamp. Parsley-like leaves, we taste it. No numb lips or tongues. Our phones tells us it's lovage. We gather more. In the cold mud, our rubber boots sink to mid-shin. Cottonwood buds are beginning to burst above. I make lovage pesto with olive oil, walnuts, and lemon. Lively bright green sauce on friend-caught halibut. A few weeks later, on the same trail, we spot a brown ridged cone pushing up through last autumn's leaves. A mushroom, but what kind? Chanterelles don't grow on this trail. Eugene thinks morel, and after 2 YouTube videos contrasting true and false, we race home to gather knives in a basket, giddy with our find. Our land grew it, we found it. Our knives slice the pitted plump caps from the hollow stems. 15 crowns fill one of Mom's ceramic plates. We take photos before slicing to share with those not present at tonight's table. Butter, garlic, heat, cast iron, spatula, toasted country blonde imported from Portland. We bite and hear a red-tailed hawk sing with pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Anne.
Thank you, Anne. I want to make a brief announcement about next month's reading, which will be May 16th. We hope you'll join us again. We have, again, 2 readers, 2 poets, Trevino Brings Plenty, and Chloe Garcia Roberts. They both operate in multiple dimensions with their art, and it will be a really exciting reading that we hope you'll take part in by listening and giving comments. And then there will be a hiatus of Windfall until September. Beth Piatote is our next reader. Beth Piatote is a Nez Perce writer, scholar, and Indigenous language revitalization activist. Associate Professor of English and Comparative Literature at the University of California, Berkeley, she directs the Arts Research Center there. Her scholarly work is creative. Her creative work, deeply learned. Her collection, The Beadworkers, uses poetry, narrative, and drama. In it, English springs to life with Nimi Putimt, the Nez Perce language, to thread traditional roots knowledge, genealogy, political history, grief, memory, and resilience. We are fortunate to have Beth Piatote with us with generous vision, quote, to see what our ancestors saw, to dream their vivid dreams, to come over a mountain with my mothers and sisters. Beth Piatote.
Oh, Katsiya, thank you so much to Amanda and Diane, to the Lane Literary Guild, the Eugene Public Library, and everyone who came tonight. Tatskalawat, so good to be here with you. Thank you, Wendy, and the Eugene Public Library. I really appreciate this opportunity. And also thank you, Anne, for that amazing reading. Your work is so beautiful, and I appreciated so much the way you talked about the origins of these stories that you shared with us and the way that you developed your craft. And you have such a beautiful lyrical voice. Thank you for the incredible gift of getting to share this space with you tonight. Eugene is such a special place to me. I did my master's degree at the University of Oregon, and I lived in Eugene for a long time. I still have some very dear friends there, the Linscoves and others, and I want to give a special acknowledgement to the amazing Native community that I was part of when I lived in Eugene, and that is still such a big part of my heart and my life. Twyla and the late Dwight Sowers, Roseanne Lestenkoff, Lisa Joe, the late Wilma Crow, Nick Sixkiller, Gordon Bettles, Don Dexter, so many wonderful people that made the urban Indian community in Eugene so vibrant and strong. And I'm so grateful to all of you. Some of the stories that ended up in this book got their inspiration or their start there. One of the stories is set there. So this book is very much has its heart in the Pacific Northwest. It's in Nez Perce, Nimipu. My homelands are the Wallowas, and the Northwest is the most special place to me. So I just want to read the opening of this book, and then I want to share a couple of poems that I've started working on. A number of years ago, I heard the Maori poet, Robert Sullivan, say, we should be using our Indigenous aesthetics in our work. And I thought, oh, I wonder what that would mean, what that would look like. And I decided as a little challenge to see whether I could use a traditional feast as a literary structure. And so this book opens with a feast, and it opens with a triptych in which I took the structure of the feast and wrote a poem. And then I used the same structure and I wrote this kind of collage of nonfiction pieces. This second piece I imagined as little dishes that are being offered in honor of each food as it comes out. And then the third piece is just a very short, conventional short story set in the 1920s in the hop fields and of Washington State. And I wanted to do this experiment because we really believe that our structures, our way of understanding the order of the world, they are so stable, and it doesn't matter if the language changes, if other things change, as long as we are still investing in the structure of our world, then that's what endures, and that is what is kunku, what is eternal, what is forever. So I'm going to read to you Feast 1 and then the first couple of entries for Feast 2. And you'll hear me call out the names of the foods as they appear in our Nimi Putimki, our Nez Perce language. Feast 1. Kus, first taste of life, not air but water. Carried by our mothers, we taste water rising from earth, turning in salt waters where you, not so, travel through ocean waves and darkness, gaining power in those far away salt currents of sea and labor, to return again to the cold river of your origin, upriver to give life, where Wuwukia bugle in fog-mantled mornings of our land awakening. We step toward Imes, each footfall a quiet petition. To be worthy of your gift, we bring you in, carry you adorned in beadwork and beauty as drums beat through heart and women sing. An songs, return to earth, belong to the land, gathered by hand, thick bitter taste of green hills, hummus cradled in your hand, rooting you to this place. Songs flow from our throats, a fine rain. The water cycle gives chaos in spring, first feast of our green. Returning sun grows, long branches reach to sky. Hungry birds share tims, offering hard seeds to roll on our tongues with succulent sound of our Nimi Putimt. We sing se mettre mountains in new dresses with baskets woven by grandmother's hands and songs we carry, we are carried to return again, give thanks again, return these songs, give breath and good words, ring, lift hands to sky, release heart thoughts. We are born in Kus. So, Feast 2. Kus. I had a dream not long after I started. Some people say that when you start dreaming in a language, that is when you know it has become fluent to you. But I know this can't possibly be so. I think I maybe knew 20 or 30 words at the time, mostly nouns and greetings and a few verbs. But I had this dream, and it was beautiful. In the dream, I saw the longhouse at Nespelem. And on the side of the longhouse, I saw clearly this word, pine, arrival. I woke just then, suddenly, and as I woke, I heard my own voice say, Paitsa, I'm coming, I'm arriving. The shock of hearing my voice impressed upon me the feeling of the dream. That dream helped me persevere when I felt small, when I was alone, when I looked at the enormity of it all. There were times when I was discouraged, when I faced the entire ocean of words and I feared the undertow would pull me under, like an eagle who's dragged into the current of a river, talons locked on the back of a salmon. Later, I would learn another word and I would hold it just as close, say it to myself, to the sky, say it to Phil and those who spoke, Paitsa, Paitokta, I'm coming back. Not so. He's from a salmon tribe over that way, over to the coast. And his tribe got terminated. I don't know why, but the folks around there stopped. Maybe it was a dark time for them. Maybe they gave up the salmon ceremony, all them, except this one guy. That's not something to do with just one person, but he did. Not even his family came. Some of his own people got on him, went hard on him for doing that. And maybe it wasn't right to do it that way, just he alone. I know that man. He's stubborn. He don't care. 8, maybe 10 years like that. He kept it up all alone. After that, people start coming back. Now you go over there to salmon ceremony with them, and there's hundreds of people there. Not even all them know this story, but it's true. Wewukia. The animals help us. We know this from the old stories, from when the world was coming to be, and the animal people offered themselves to us, each one in their way, each one in order. And still they offer themselves to us. A few years ago, I saw a photograph in the newspaper of a ship in the Pacific Ocean headed north. The ship was bearing the ancestors and belongings of the Haida Gwaii people. The ship was carrying them back home, bringing them home from a museum. So there was the ship headed north. And in front of the ship, leading the procession, was a bald eagle flying in the sky. And swimming alongside the ship, cresting with the waves, was a pod of killer whales. They traveled that way all along the Pacific coast, all the way home. The animals help us. We know this from the old stories, from family stories, from court stories. I know a story that's happening right now about a man who called on an elk to help him, and the elk came to his aid, and now that man is in court. But listen, this is a good story. You see, the man was Sinacht from north of here. Many years ago, the Sinacht people were suffering from smallpox. They were weakened, and the Canadian miners and settlers hunted those people down, drove them out of their homeland. The survivors came to us for refuge. We took them in, and now they are strong again. Here we call them the Lakes people, but they never stopped wanting to go back, or going back, in fact, to visit their homelands and hunt. Canada, in the meantime, decided the Sinicht were extinct and extinguished their rights. But the Sinicht people are still alive, and so are their rights. A few years ago, one of those unextinct Sinicht men killed an elk in his homelands. Then he called the game officials in Canada and turned himself in. They took the bait. When the province pressed charges against him for taking big game without a license, he pleaded not guilty. He cited his Aboriginal rights to hunt in his own territory. And now that case is in court, and Canada will have to look at that man standing in the middle of the room and all his people around him, and Canada will have to admit that the Sinicht are not extinct. The Sinicht man is very brave, and so is the elk who gave himself. That man and that elk knew each other from long ago. They met in dreams and sweat, blood and forest. The man needed the elk. The people needed the elk. Without the elk, there would be no case, no path home, no court for the man to present himself to the state and say, "We are alive." So I'm going to stop there. And I want to stop there because I want to tell you the end of the story for anyone who hasn't heard about this case. At the time I wrote this book, I was finishing it in 2018. This case was in court. It was active, and it has now gone all the way to the Canadian Supreme Court. And the Canadian Supreme Court did, in fact, rule in favor of the Sinicht, and their Aboriginal homelands are recognized, and they are making their way back home. So there's a wonderful documentary called Older Than the Crown. And if you want to know more about this, I encourage you to look into it. I want to turn now to poetry. As was mentioned in this beautiful, generous introduction, I'm very involved in Indigenous language revitalization. And one of the strategies for language revitalization is using creativity and the arts for revitalization. And so I've turned to poetry as and short form as a way to do this. There's a lot of Nez Perce Nimi Putinski in my short story collection, but I've turned to it increasingly in poems, and I'm just finishing my first collection. This past summer, I was fortunate and had 3 pieces published in Poetry Magazine, and I want to share just one poem. I think I just have time to do that. And the poem is called 1855. And just by way of introduction, I'll say that I love Walt Whitman. But also, as I was learning about Walt Whitman and learning about and taking in his exuberant rhythms and celebration of possibility and the unrestrained American spirit that is embodied in Walt Whitman's poetry, I also had to think about what 1855, the year that Leaves of Grass was published, meant for us, meant for the Native people in the Pacific Northwest, because 1855 was the year that the treaties were signed that created massive land cessations and changed our lives forever. So I wanted other people to also put these 2 things together. So I wrote this poem called 1855 with the first lines of Walt Whitman's poem from Leaves of Grass. 1855. I celebrate myself, and what I assume, you shall assume. For every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. I loaf and invite my soul. I lean and loaf at my ease, observing a spear of summer grass. Walt Whitman, Leaves of Grass. I celebrate myself, and what I hereby cede, you shall hereby cede. For the country relinquished by me as good is relinquished by you. I loaf and convey to the United States all the right, title, and interest in my country, occupied and claimed. I give and grieve, meeting on spears of summer grass. I celebrate myself, and what I hold in reserve for my exclusive right and occupation shall be available from time to time to the president at his discretion to be surveyed into lots. I acknowledge my dependence and promise to be friendly. I pledge and agree not to shelter or conceal offenders, but to deliver them up to the authorities for trial. I celebrate my miochat, who bore losses that we would not bear. For nunim wakeswit is nunim titokanawit kunko. I hold and cherish Article 3. I protect and love our usual and accustomed places, our exclusive right to take fish, to hunt, to gather roots and berries, and pasture our horses on open land. I celebrate nunim wetis, our land. Ka nunim wetis, he was nunim wetis kunku, and our land is our land forever. I love and enlarge my soul, and neset wisa inim titokan, wach nunim wetis, tinipnitsa wailetpu. I love my people and our land. I remember the place of ryegrass. We are one with our land, and our land is our ancestors' land always. All the land they are lighting, the land is shining bright forever. Nun wasich kustite nunem wetis, ka nunem wetis he was nunem anokonanem wetis, kunko. Hilakawasich la amna wetisna, wetis hilakawisa, kunko. Katsiyayo, yochkalo, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Beth. It's
Yeah.
really powerful.
We have more time.
We
Beth.
have a little more
We
time.
have more time, Beth.
I think we have to ask for an encore, Beth. You're wonderfully succinct. I mean, you have more time.
Okay, well, thank you. I did have some other things. All right, let me explain just a little bit about the structure of this poem. Our language is polysynthetic, and we have a verb in the middle, and then we have prefixes that say the who and the how, and suffixes that say the when and the where. And so one verb can connect a lot of different kinds of words. And so I wrote this poem that's kind of like a dictionary entry that shows that with the same verb, we can say, I'm coming out of the forest. We can say, I sow. We can say, the river flows. We can say, I remember. And it's because the central verb is to come out. So I'm just going to read 3 of these entries from this longer poem called I Cause My Heart to Pour Out is how to say remember. Pitnisa, I'm coming out of the forest. I'm coming out of the forest, my hair carrying the scent of fire and my body uncertain of needles. Are they sharp or soft? What I knew before, I no longer know. I saw a doe lying in a pool of water, not dead, but still small capsule of fur and hoof, curve of back. I came close. Her haunches were stone, smooth rock worn by water, hind legs knit into rufous mud, an emerald skin of moss her belly. She opened her eyes and breathed, though not a fish, and I am pitiful, a pitiful human, afraid that the forest will swallow me too. I mark the place where I saw her, and I come out of the forest thirsty. Supnisa, I sew. I sew a red dress to bring my sister home. I seam a red dress to sew her to myself. I see, I fight, sharp object comes out. I sew a red dress to seam my sister home. I sew a red dress to seam my sister. I seam a red dress. I sew for redress. I so want my sister home. I see red. I sew dress. I sew red. Eyes so red. I sew, I. Hitkepnisa, it pours out, it flows out. Hitkepnisa, the river swiftly flows. She is muscle and tenderness, churn and eddy, smart and sexy. By day, she's a party girl laughing too loud. You know what I mean. Here, have another drink. When she comes in, a path clears. Tule and willow bow down. The valley splits. She goes where she wants because she can. Her neck drips with diamonds in sun. She opens wide her arms. Heron moves through her shadows. Golden eye nibbles at her fingers, and kingfisher waits on a wire. In twilight, moose lies down, and bear comes out to nuzzle. Flowers sigh and close their eyes. At night, she makes even the moon shy. The way she moves those dark hips, and oh, the sound she makes, oh. She is just too much with that mouth, that body, too big, too loud, too hungry, too wild. She is the life of the party. That river is one fast gal. So I'll give you just the very last short one. Sepet mibnisa. I make mine remember, or I cause my heart to pour out. I cause my heart to pour out is how to say remember, or perhaps my heart causes to pour out. It's hard to translate causative plus heart plus pour out in words. Better to let my body translate. When I remember you, your hand is in mine again, and your dreams ride a tandem bicycle with mine. You stop at the Elm City Market for milk on the way home. I remember you, and then I must stop remembering and cut off my hands again and flatten the tires and give back the key. But when the grammar is like this, sepet mipnisa, your touch aches my blood, your voice spills from my eyes, everything you ever gave me flows through me, belongs. Yokkalo.
I think you have caused our hearts to pour out. I think we're going to remember this.
Thank you. Thank you
so much. We don't have questions, but we do have some lovely comments. So let's see. We've got somebody who's called Let's Make a Mess Today. Says beautiful and has a ton of clapping emojis for both of you. So that's lovely. Nico Swan says thank you. Let's make a mess today. Make a mess today says stunning. Listening to a writer read their work is next level. Thank you. Nico Swan says, I hope for bead workers to become an audiobook.
It's an audiobook, and I think you can actually get it for free. So thank you.
Yay.
And also, I got so relaxed listening to Anne and just enjoying story time so much. And I just want to agree with this statement that it's wonderful to hear people read their own work.
Yeah, absolutely. Henry Alley writes to both Anne and Beth, I enjoyed your readings, particularly their images. Thank you. A question. What were the advantages to writing a mixed genre work that blends, for example, poetry and prose? So I think that would be for both of you from Henry.
Great question.
Mm-hmm.
In the wrong place. Yeah, I don't know. I think, one, I don't know how to write a straight narrative. I think it's a lot of work to connect all the dots. And so when you can put different genres together, it allows the reader to make jumps and connect things in their own mind. Um, and I also think it's the way that a lot of people's brains work. I mean, nobody thinks like this, you know. We go all over the place, and so for me, I really enjoy reading books that play with form, and so I thought I'd give it a try. So it was that's a lot of fun for me to figure out what kind of form I want for this particular bit of information, or and sometimes the form finds itself, like, and there's a couple of lists in the book, like a list of our farm, how many miles away different things are, and then a list of time, what happened in the events that happened so many years ago, and those were really fun for me to play with. So yeah.
I would just echo that too, that is some combination of play, but also like what is the best medium for the idea, and the importance of form and content supporting each other. And yeah, it's just part of that creative transformation and letting the piece be what it wants to be.
Thank you. Let's Make a Mess a Day does also mention that seems like a wonderful collage of words. It's interesting. And some more applause. I didn't get any emails, but that's not unusual. And here's a question. Annika Lockard writes, this was awesome to listen to. Is there a way we could contact the authors?
I'm happy to share my contact. I also have a Facebook page called Ann Stinson's Writing World, if anybody wants to contact me that way. But I'm happy to share my email if anybody. Is that okay? I don't work. I can put it in the
private chat, and I can paste it.
Okay.
I'm very easy to find because I work at a public institution. You can email me at Berkeley, and also I have an Instagram account, and just have very low expectations. I'm terrible at social media, but I do. If someone sends me a message, I do read them and respond. So that is a good way to get a hold of me.
Let me just get this up here really quick. Paste. You do it right here. And voila.
And I wanted to say that the audiobook is available through Multnomah County Library too, though there's a wait list for it. So it's yes, I know. I tried to listen to it today, and I could only listen to 2 minutes. So people are waiting to hear. So.
And the Eugene Public Library also has a couple of different databases that allow us to download audiobooks. Some right away, some with a bit of a wait, but both also exist there. So feel free to contact us at the Eugene Public Library. We can help you download those books too. So lots of ways to hear. And you can also, of course, watch these readings again on StreamYard at your leisure. So that's a lovely thing as well. Well, I don't think there are any other questions right now. Let me double check. There's some wonderful thank yous. And let me also do a quick couple.
Can I ask Beth a question?
Yes.
Yeah. So I love the story of the one-man fish ceremony, the one-man salmon ceremony. And I'm just wondering how you were inspired by that, or where that came from, or if, in fact, that has inspired other people to have a one-man salmon ceremony for their people.
Well, it is a true story, and it was the person specifically that I was thinking about was the late Don Ivy, the chief of the Colquell tribe, who tragically, has passed on. But there's this story that there was a time that the Colquells were not observing their salmon ceremony, but he would go on his own. So I hope I'm not telling stories out of school, but yeah, it's a true story. True story. I really admired his and recognized how difficult it would be to make that kind of decision.
It's an enormously powerful story about the thin line between preserving and losing.
Yeah.
It's not the ceremony if it's not collective, but it's really not the ceremony if no one's doing it. And so it's a wonderful conclusion.
And then also, if one is doing it, I mean, and knows about it, you're with your people who were doing it. I mean, I think.
And the salmon.
Yeah, the salmon people, or you.
But your ancestors,
don't let
right?
it, the ancestors, and you don't let it. You just keep the thread going, or the little stream. Keep it going. Anyway, it's beautiful.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for being here, for offering your wonderful readings. And I think that concludes our evening. If anybody else has anything to say, and if not, just a hearty thank you. And thank you to the audience as well, both now and in the future who comes back to watch this.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.